Hello, and welcome to another episode of BrettCasts Let's Read. This is another fanfiction episode, and this episode I'm going to be reading some Animal Crossing fanfiction that I found on Wattpad. The story I will be reading is entitled X CJ Oneshots. As always, I will be commenting as I read. Chapter 1 is titled Stream Highlight. It was late at night, and Flick wanted to paint a new butterfly he had caught just the other day. He rummaged around his room to try and find his box of painting supplies, only to realize he left it in CJ's room while he was painting there the other night. He sighed softly and went to CJ's room. Flick could hear him inside talking to his chat. He slowly opened the door and stepped into the doorframe. CJ looked at him with a puzzled expression, and Flick pointed at his art supplies in the corner. CJ then motioned Flick to come closer. Reluctantly, he did. When he got closer, CJ pulled him down by the arm so he could be level with the camera. Flick's crimson eyes widened at the light being projected by CJ's monitor. This was his first time ever being on CJ's stream. Everybody say hello to my friend Flick. Flick just stood there, wide-eyed nervously. CJ chuckled and whispered in his ear, "Are you gonna say hi back?" Flick then noticed the chat and the amount of love he was getting. "Hi. Oh my god, he's adorable. Hi. Hey. That's because they're not friends. Hi." Flick smiled softly. "Hi to you guys too. Wow, you might have to come here more often. You're like a natural," CJ teased. The sound of splashing water filled the room, announcing a donation. Soon the robotic voice said, "Please don't leave us, Flick. We need to see your bromance in action." Flick chuckled softly. "Sorry, I have painting to do." "Aw. Bye." "No, don't leave us alone with CJ." "Why don't you just paint here?" CJ said. It sounded more of a plea than a question. "Okay, fine. Just let me get my butterfly." He left the room uncertain of how he felt. He knew he wasn't going to be able to focus there, but he wanted to stay. For CJ. He walked to his room and got his glass box with his newest butterfly in it and walked back. Before he opened the door, he heard the robotic voice say, "You sure you guys are just roommates?" Right as the robotic voice finished, Flick entered the room, not giving CJ time to reply. He placed the butterfly on CJ's coffee table and sat on his bed, still in frame of the camera. "Hey CJ, you gonna answer that question just now?" Flick said jokingly. CJ stared at him for a second with a "are you serious right now" look on his face. Flick did the same thing, intimidating him. They stared at each other like that until they both burst out laughing. Of course, the robotic voice had to ruin the moment. "You guys are the cutest couple ever." "Why, thank you," CJ said looking back at the monitor. Flick dropped his brush on the floor, his face redder than it normally was. He knew CJ didn't mean it, but what if he did? Okay, why is this something that fanfiction authors do with these kinds of stories? The thing when one character is unsure if the other character has feelings for them, and will completely dismiss the notion and then be like, "But what if it's true?" You can't just dismiss something and then be not sure about it. "You might want to check on your boyfriend," somebody in the chat said. CJ looked over to see Flick's flushed face. Ooh. CJ smiled softly as Flick's flustered behavior. Stop doing that, Story. Stop with the... "Sorry guys, no more boyfriend. I think we might have killed Flick," CJ said jokingly. Flick got up from CJ's bed and grabbed the butterfly's box and walked over to CJ and the camera. He tapped CJ on the shoulder. The smaller boy looked beside him. Flick kissed him softly on the lips and left with his butterfly. CJ's face was completely red. He touched his lips with a look of shock and happiness on his face. He looked at the camera and smiled softly. "I think that's all for tonight. Bye, guys." "Bye." And they were roommates. Oh my gosh, my heart. Shh, Nintendo's watching. And that's the end of chapter 1. I have to say that aside from some of the small grammar things, that was actually a pretty good story and feels very much like how Flick and CJ would act. I can't complain. It was adorable. Chapter 2 is titled The Night Sky. Why are you up so late? CJ said as he placed a hand on his boyfriend's shoulder. The taller boy stopped staring at the moon and turned his head towards the smaller boy. He kissed him softly on the lips and continued looking at the sky in awe. Have you ever thought about the fact that it's always raining? He said as if he was dreaming. His words were hazing, but they still made an impact. You mean like how it's always raining somewhere else? CJ said, taking his seat beside Flick at the window. The chameleon nodded his head slowly, not taking his eyes off the sky. CJ rested his head on Flick's, trying to take in the same view that was so mesmerizing. The stars twinkled brightly in the black sky and the moon was creeping behind some clouds, almost as if it was a child playing a game of hide and seek. Staring at the sky was very calming, and CJ started to understand Flick's strange behavior. It's like everything had a new meaning, and even the most complicated things seemed so small and simple. Like a boat on the ocean, the wind is faint and the waves are calm. And that's the moment I'm sure the boat doesn't have a care in the world, but then again, who would? And that ends chapter 2. It was kind of short, but there was a lot of great stuff here. The way that the author describes the night sky, the way the wind felt and everything was just great. I felt like I was there. Again, some small grammar stuff, but it doesn't take away from the great feel that the author is making the reader feel here without those descriptors. Chapter 3 is titled Midnight High 1. Flick's POV. I looked at my hazy reflection in the puddle on the street. I looked so dead but alive at the same time. I blew out my cigarette and flicked it on the ground and continued walking down the street. As I continued walking, my footsteps started to melt together. The world started to melt together. I have to admit, I might have taken something before going out on this little nighttime adventure of mine. The night was cold and the street lights were the only thing lighting the way. There was a broken mirror and the side of a road beside... Oh my god. There was a broken mirror on the side of a road beside a trash can. I remember looking at myself in it and thinking, wow, I'm so fucking useless. And then I saw him on the sidewalk. He looked up at me and furrowed his brow. I put my finger to his lips to shush him, pulled out my pack of cigarettes. I light one and hand it to him, and light another for myself. He wiped his tears and stared at it in confusion. Oh wait, I am already confused here. First, remember that these are stories that are not meant to connect. They're one-shots, so don't think this has anything to do with the first two. Anyway, Flick seems to be in a very dark and depressing state, and he's also smoking and does drugs of some sort. So he's out smoking and happens to run into who I'm assuming is CJ, who's crying for some reason. I don't know, I feel like there's something missing here. I took it away from him. Here, I'll help you, I said, sticking it in his mouth. He coughed and spit it. Yeah, like that, I said, nudging him. I puffed out a big cloud of smoke in his face. He seemed totally done with my shit, so I stopped. Are you going to talk, or... He looked at me, even with the most bored expression I'd ever seen. Can you even talk? Yes, I can talk, idiot, he said sharply. His voice was high-pitched, and it fit his petite figure as well. Who even are you? I haven't seen you around before. I'm CJ. I just moved here yesterday with my dad. Well, CJ, nice to meet you. Now, are you going to tell me why you're crying? He looked down, not wanting to look me in the eyes. I was not ready for what he was about to say. I moved here because my mom died. She fell out of a window. I saw it happen. I was outside. I saw her hit the ground. His voice was full of pain, but so soft at the same time. His voice didn't shake or quiver. He spoke as though he accepted it. I didn't say anything. Honestly, I don't think anything needed to be said. I just passed him another cigarette. Well, that's the end of chapter 3. I gotta say, compared to this first two stories, this is dark and depressing. But it's still pretty good. Grammar stuff has improved, but I still see things here and there. Chapter 4 is titled Midnight High 2. CJ's POV. We basically spent the whole night getting high and forgetting our problems. I'm not surprised that I woke up on the sidewalk on the other side of town. Guessing by the headache state of my body, it was a long night. My legs were shaking as I tried to stand up, almost stepping on the boy from last night. He was passed out beside me with a smug look on his face, and looked like he had a long night too. I kneeled down and poked him in the face, trying to wake him up. His crimson eyes opened slowly. They looked tired and dead. I wondered why he was out here so late too. "Oh hey, it's you, the short dude," he said playfully whilst getting up. Man, I hated this dude so much and I didn't even know his name yet. "So what's your name, mystery prick?" I said bitterly. He looked at me in confusion. "What?" I said. "I already told you my name last night." "What?" "I didn't tell you anything other than..." I stopped before finishing that sentence. "We hung out all night, CJ, he said with a hint of sadness. He looked hurt that I didn't remember. Suddenly I remembered taking the cigarette, the alcohol, and the weed. I've never done anything like this before, so I was pretty taken aback by it and went completely out of control. I took way too much that night. Why are we at this end of town?" I said faintly, still in shock that I'd even taken drugs in the first place. "We went to my house. You really don't remember?" he said, placing a hand on my shoulder. "If I did, I wouldn't be asking," he said, looking intently in the eyes. "I'll try and help you remember," he said, grabbing my arm and dragging us away. He brought us to a broken down part of town with everything in shambles and pointed at a sidewalk. Suddenly I remembered everything. Flashback. After CJ took the cigarette, Flick helped him up. "So what's your name, new kid?" "It's CJ. CJ, huh? Mine's Flick." He got up and handed me his hand to CJ, helping him up from the cold sidewalk. "Let's go get something to drink," Flick said, walking down the middle of the street. They got to a small convenience store and bought some random alcohol. Whatever would do the trick. It was a long night filled with tears, laughs, and love? CJ remembered looking at Flick in the moonlight. The way he was illuminated by the light was angelic, like he was an angel with no wings, a soul with no purpose. He remembered getting up and wrapping both his arms around the taller boy's waist and resting his head on Flick's chest, basking in the moment, taking in everything, his touch, his scent, the way he fit perfectly in his arms. "Thank you. I needed this." He pulled his head away and looked up, being met with crimson eyes. The moment was perfect. Their minds were hazing even now. Even so, they both knew what they wanted. Flick leaned forward and CJ got on his tiptoes to meet his lips. Their lips locked together instantly. The kiss was needy, sad, and lonely. They needed each other because truthfully no one else did. They had no one else. Fuck, I can't read. That ends chapter 4 and this fan fiction all the same. Despite the last story being a little more dark and depressing on the whole, especially compared to the other two stories, it still had a really nice ending. Plus, I'm just glad I found a fan fiction that didn't have any sexual content in it. On the whole, this collection was cute and wholesome. I really only found some minor grammar and spelling things and maybe a few other things here and there that could use some fixing to really improve the story. Maybe I'll do my own revision of this story and maybe I'll move on to something else. That's all I have to say, so if we added the conversation, leave a comment below. As always, thank you for watching/listening, and goodbye.